Welcome to Dark Horse Auto and Diesel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the transmission fluid temperature sensor on a Kia Sorento. This one in particular is a 2011 model year. And since we have to drain the transmission fluid out to change the sensor, I'm going to show you how to properly refill it as well. And this is useful for routine maintenance. Kia says you don't have to ever replace the transmission fluid, but they are also in the business of selling cars. So if you want it to last, you're going to want to do this. The first thing you need to do is get the thing up on some ramps or up on a lift or something, because we're going to be doing quite a bit of this underneath. And unless you're super skinny, you're going to have a really difficult time otherwise. I've already got the battery and the battery tray out. The main reason for that is because right down here, this plastic cover, we have to take this off, and taking the battery tray out allows us easier access to some of these top bolts. Taking that out is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to go into too much detail with that, because if you need help with that part, the rest of this job is probably too complicated for you. You don't necessarily have to pull the air box out here, but I have it out just because I'm doing a couple other things while I'm in here. Now, before we do anything else, you want to make sure that you can get your fill plugs out first, because if you drain this and you can't refill it, you're pretty well screwed. Obviously, we're up top here. The fill plug is that guy right there. And you can just use a 3/8 drive extension to get to it. This is made of plastic, so be very careful with it. I've already got mine loosened up, but there's very little torque on it. So I'll go ahead and take that out. And then take a look at your O-ring on there. This one looks pretty good, so we're just going to reuse it. Next, we'll come underneath the front of the vehicle here and start taking our belly pan off here. And there's supposed to be little things going on here, usually kind of like the ones that you took off for the air box, similar to these guys here too. You just unscrew that center part. But there's a bunch of 12mm bolts on this, and yours may differ from this one a little bit. There's actually, I believe, supposed to be another part coming off the back here, but somebody conveniently already removed it for us. So we'll just take all those bolts out and drop the belly tray here so we have access to everything. And forgot to mention these here, really convenient location, but like up under here, you have to take those out. There's one there and there's one on the other side. That's going to require two hands. I think you can figure that out. Reason number 485 why mechanics hate engineers. We're not taking this whole bumper off just to get to these stupid little clips. Now, if yours are like mine and not wanting to come out, just get in there with the pry bar and make them come out. Like that. Now, with any luck, it might come out whole, and if you are really a glutton for punishment, you can take that centerpiece out and reuse it. Next, we'll make sure our check plug, I guess you want to call it, is free. And you want to get a pan ready, just in case some fluid comes out of here. And that's just a 3/8 square drive. You might be able to use your fingers on it too. But just turn it. There's a rubber seal on this here too. We'll go ahead and take that out now so we don't lose it, and also so we can inspect it. Now we can remove our drain plug, which is this guy right here, and that's going to be 24mm. It's also nice to have a big open one like this, so when you drop your drain plug in there, it's easier to fish out. Now note the color of this fluid. Kind of brown looking. The new fluid's supposed to be pink or red, and this is why I don't believe it when Kia and Hyundai say, oh, it's good for the life of the transmission. Well, eventually the old fluid is going to cause problems with the transmission, but even at that, it did last the life of the transmission, even though that was the failure point. So they're not lying when they say that, but it's kind of deceptive. So now if all you're doing is a drain and refill the transmission and you're not worried about the transmission fluid sensor, go ahead and skip ahead to whatever time I put about right in here, and that's where we will start the refilling procedure. Now, if you're changing the trans fluid temp sensor, keep watching, because next I'm going to show you how to take this cover off, which is where the sensor is located. So there's not really much of a good way for me to show you how to get to these bolts. They're rather difficult, but you can see them. You kind of have to get at different angles and stuff, but you can see where most of them are at. There's a couple you can get from the top. Most of them so far, what I've been doing, a swivel on there, U-joint, some extensions, and what I'm doing is I'm going up through here and getting it on the bolt that way, and then just spinning it from down here. And since I can't get a camera in there and see what I'm doing, and actually while you're doing this, you can either see them or feel them, but not really both. There's no good way to explain how to do it other than just get your hands up in there, feel around, look around, and eventually you'll get it. You know, thankfully, these bolts really aren't that tight, so once you get them broke loose, you can pretty much spin them out by hand. And also, if you've got small enough hands, you can get up in here and you can actually reach, I guess, all of them with a deep well socket on a 1/4 inch drive ratchet. It's not exactly easy or fun, but it does work. So now I've got all the bolts out except for the top two, which are just threaded out a few turns. They're loose. And then this easier to get to bottom one. Just loosen this one up. I'm not going to take it totally out yet because I'm certain we're going to get, yeah, we got some transmission fluid dripping out there. Be prepared for a mess. So we'll just go ahead and take this one all the way out now. Now you may have to gently pry on this a little bit to get it broke loose from the case. Sometimes not. There we go. So I'm gonna let that sit there and drip for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna take the top two bolts out and we'll take this cover off. Well, we probably won't take it off completely. We'll just get it slid out of the way because I can even get that out of here completely. Make sure you're keeping track of your bolts. I've counted 19 so far. So that cover, it might be possible to get it out. I don't know, I'm not even gonna bother trying, but it's not really necessary either. Once you've got it out of the way, that little thing right there, that is our transmission fluid temp sensor. And while you're in here too, take a look at your gasket, and this one looks pretty good. And as much as of a pain as that's gonna be to replace, I'm just gonna stick it back on there and hope for the best. We'll just wipe it off real gently, make sure there's not any crap on it. Next, we need to get the wiring off of that sensor. And there's not really a good way to tell you how to do it. You just kind of gotta carefully but somewhat forcefully wiggle it. And I mean, if you have to break out little pieces of the sensor itself, it's fine. Just make sure you don't damage the connector. And should be able to just pop it off of there. And then we will take a 10mm. And that cover is really going to get annoying. Sometimes you'll find that perfect position and it'll stay there, and then you look at it and it moves. There, that works. Paper towel kind of adds a little bit of extra friction. If you've got big hands, this is going to be probably a little bit of a problem for you. They also use like a 12-inch long bolt for this. There we go. Unnecessarily long, but whatever. Now get your pan ready, because when we pop that sensor off, a little bit more fluid's going to come out. And just reach up in there with some pliers or something. And there we go. Now we'll take our new sensor, make sure the O-ring's on there, and you're going to want to put a little bit of transmission fluid on it just to lubricate that O-ring a little bit. grab your bolt and get it started. Then we'll snug that mounting bolt down. And don't forget to plug your wire back in. And that actually fits a lot nicer than it did on the old one. Then we can work on getting our cover back on all those bolts. When you're putting your bolts back in that cover, you want to make sure that you get all of them started and threaded in several turns before you snug anything up, because otherwise you're going to have issues getting all of them back in. And then once you've got them all started, then you can go through and start snugging them all up. Basically, all you're going to do is just run them in until the cover pretty much touches the aluminum. Like, you'll feel a little bit of resistance there, and then just snug it up like maybe another quarter turn or so. Try to snug these up in as much of a cross pattern as you can. Obviously, with 19 bolts or so, it's going to be a little difficult to keep track of, but just don't start on one side and just work your way all the way around. Just, you know, kind of bounce around a little bit and try to snug things up evenly so you don't damage the cover or compromise the gasket seal. So if you're just watching for the transmission fluid change, you should be rejoining us about right now. So next, what we're going to do, get your drain plug, clean it off. This is a magnet right here, so there might be some shavings on it. That's normal as long as it's not excessive. If it's really fuzzy, you might have a problem, but a little bit's completely normal. And you're supposed to put a new crush washer in there. We'll get that threaded back up in there. Oof. Ah. Right down in there. You know, normally I don't have problems dropping tools all the time, but while that may be the first time that you saw it on camera during this job, that's actually about the 6th time I've dropped something right in the pan. That happened in the process as well, so, you know, I guess we just are going to measure this job not in the amount of work done, but the amount of blood lost. So anyway, we're going to leave that plug out of there. That's actually the fluid level check plug. And we're going to get our drain pan positioned underneath that so we can probably drop more stuff in it. So this is where things start to get really stupid. You probably see that check plug down there and you're thinking, well, that's easy. That's just like a manual transmission. You fill it up till it runs out and you're done. Well, Kia had other ideas, and that's not really so much the case. So we are going to fill it up until fluid runs out of it. But what you're supposed to do after that, mind you, this is all supposed to be done on a level surface, which that's kind of an issue because we have it up on ramps, but that actually kind of helps us because once it runs out, you're supposed to put that plug in and then add an extra 300 milliliters of transmission fluid. But since we're up on ramps and we have the front elevated, that extra 300 milliliters will probably end up going in there anyway because the check plug is elevated a little bit. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to call that good. And then it gets even dumber because once you do that, then you're supposed to go and take it for a drive and get the transmission fluid between 122 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and then recheck the fluid on level ground, which we're going to do that, and I'll walk you through that part as we get there. Next, we can start pouring in our transmission fluid. This transmission, they spec the SP4 or SPIV, and this one here does meet that spec, so that's what we're using. Now, according to Hyundai, it's going to take about 5 quarts. So even they're not even sure how much it takes, which is, you know, awesome. So we'll just dump it in until it starts dumping back out. Now, a really long funnel will be your best friend here because they have it in a pretty stupid location. Oh, sounds like we have fluid running out after just 4 quarts. Yep, we do. Next, we'll make sure that little O-ring is cleaned off and get that stuck up in there. It kind of has like a little channel that it fits in. Yeah, this is a really environmentally friendly procedure that Kia has come up with here. Let's just waste brand new fluid. Good idea. And then make sure your cap is cleaned off and get that stuck on there. You should be able to rotate it enough by hand to get it to snap in. You'll feel it. It's got like a little detent to it. Then we'll put this back in, make sure that O-ring's in good shape and it's doesn't have a bunch of dirt on it. Now this is plastic, so be very careful on how much you tighten it up. The torque spec for it is literally like 2.2 to 3.5 foot-pounds, I think it is. Like a torque wrench isn't even going to register that. So what I do is just get my 3/8 extensions on there and then just snug it up by hand. That's it. Then next we'll get our battery tray and anything else we took apart, get that all put back in, and then we're gonna go take it for a drive and get the transmission warmed up to, like I said, about 122 to 140 degrees. So this warming the transmission up part might take a little bit. As you can see, I've already put 9.5 miles on it now. I just stopped and checked with a temp gun and it was showing like 118. Hopefully by the time I get back to the shop, it'll be up to the at least 122 that I need it to be. And while you're driving it around, warming everything up, just pay attention, make sure everything's shifting good. If it's starting to slip or it doesn't seem to be shifting right, you might still have to add more fluid before you even get to this part. So just be mindful of that. All right, we're back at the shop. Now, according to Kia's recommendation, you're supposed to, put it in park, let it set for 3 seconds, back to drive for 3 seconds. You're supposed to do that a couple of times. It looks like we might have went a little too warm with it, so we'll let it cool down for a few, and then we'll go from there. There, we're looking good. Now you want to get your drain pan ready because we're going to probably waste even more perfectly good transmission fluid. And this time I do have it sitting on the ground. We're doing this part right. So we just need to get up in here and pop this thing loose again. And what we're looking for is just a steady stream of fluid coming out. And this is awesome because they're having you do this on hot transmission fluid. So, it's real safe too. Good job, Kia. Yep, I'm happy with that. And now we're done. If it doesn't run out like that, you'll need to add a little bit more. You don't want it pouring out, but that was a good stream coming out, and that's what they call for. So we're going to call that good and send it. And if you do need to add some, you don't have to take the battery cover back out. You can just get a universal joint on the end of a long extension like this and just get it fished down in there. Show you that it is possible. So I don't need to add any, so I'm going to tighten that back up. Just hand tight. And then last thing, don't forget to put your belly pan back on. I'm not going to cover that in the video because if you took it off, I'm sure you can get it back on. So that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps you.